Hi, my name's Keith Cooper, and in this video I'm going to do a sort of video overview review of the Epson P5000 printer. As you can see, it's a fair size printer. It's a 17-inch printer, so print A2 sheet, takes 17-inch roll paper, has roll and sheet support, has also a sheet cassette holder at the front, which is actually useful even for photo printing. It's quite a solid design. But anyway, as I said, it's big. I would just quick note on this review is that I have a detailed written review of this printer I wrote a few years ago before I started making videos, and that goes into far more detail. Now this is quite a long video because it's quite a complex printer, but there's even more information and links, including all the profiling I did and other testing. I'm going to go more of an overview in this, but as I say, it comes on a pallet. It's huge. It needs two people to move that, unless you're particularly strong. I needed to get somebody's help to move it in here when I rearranged this office for shooting the videos. It is not something to move on your own at all. It needs space. Now, as I've got it set up, there's only an inch or two gap at the back of the printer here. If I wanted to print board, and it prints on board, so there's a straight through print path for it. If I wanted to do that, I would need to have enough space at the back to be able to, for the board to go through and then come back out the front. You load from the front, goes out, comes back. If I tried loading board as it stands, all it would do, it would slam into the wall in the back. And I've seen this happen with these, and it's quite tough. It would mark the wall, damage the card, and probably wouldn't do the printer much good either. So if you're going to print on board, make sure you've got the space. There's diagrams and things in the review that cover all the space requirements and everything like that. Let's see, in terms of the things people ask me about inks, it's a pigment ink printer, uses ultrachrome inks, version of those. It has only 80mm starter cartridges. Now the cartridges on this are quite large. There's an ink panel down at the front, and the ink carts just pop out. Now these ones here, this is a 200ml cart. This is matte black, and these last quite a long while. The starters are only 80 though, but they do get you up and going and will produce quite a good range of prints. One of the things you'll get with a printer like this is that the printer is essentially cheaper to run because the inks are not expensive. So I'm going to pop that back in there. It just clicks back in. One little bit I would say that when you start the printer up, and I've got another article that looks at initial configuration and use of the printer, make sure that you don't accidentally touch these panels, because if one of these panels, spring loaded, if one of them flips open during the initialization process is restarted. Now I ended up wasting a bit of ink on that for that, and as a result of that, the cart on this side, there's ink cartridges on this side, ink cartridges on this side. This one here has around the corner here a bit of masking tape to make sure that this does not open unintended. I've had this open whilst I'm leaning over the printer to look in this little window at the top here to see what's happening with the prints. You don't want that happening mid-print, it causes problems. So little note there, not all of them do it, but some of them, I've heard other people say this, the catches are a little bit easy to release. So a little bit of masking tape there just helps save any problems with that. The inks, when you start it up, you get a choice of either putting a light black or a violet ink in. Now the violet ink is for expanding the gamut. And in fact, violet ink is found in the P700, P900 ink sets. If you're thinking of wanting a 17-inch printer, I've got a review article or video that looks at the P900 versus the P5000, just in case you're not sure what the differences are, which might be better for you. Both have their advantages and disadvantages depending on what you want to do. But anyway, you've got, with this printer, you've got a choice right at the start of whether to use light black or violet. Now some people go, violet, I want the bigger print gamut. However, that violet is really there because the main market this printer is aimed at is the proofing market. And the idea is that the violet ink extends your gamut so you can cover more Pantone colours. Now, when I'm printing photos, I really don't care much about the range of Pantone colours, and it is a relatively small improvement in the gamut compared to the light black, which makes for smoother transitions, which improves the quality of all the lighter printing of the printer, no matter what colour. So Epson recommend, and I see no reason to go against this, that if you're going to use your P5000 for printing photos, black and white, and colour, then go for the LLK, the option to start with. Do not load violet ink because it is a one-off choice. Once you've made it, that printer is committed to being a LLK or a violet version of the printer. So don't mess that one up. It does ask you to confirm several times which way in the setup process. So you would have to be particularly clueless to get it wrong. But you have been warned. In fact, you're warned many times of it. And as I say, loading up stuff on this, there's no problem with normal use of inks here. When they run out, you can do a live swap. You can, because the ink carts are sealed. If you've got an ink cartridge that is very low and you're concerned about it and you're going to be doing a very long print, say on a roll or something like that, and ideally you don't want to run out, you can put a new cartridge in. And then when you've done the print, you can put the old cartridge back in with the smaller ink until it runs out if you're doing some smaller prints or something like that. The ink carts are sealed, so when you take them out, there's no leakage, there's no nothing. And also, I did check, I've checked several times when ink carts have run out of this, they are truly empty. There's no more than the odd drop or two of ink inside the bag that's inside that little plastic case there. Right, how do you connect it up to things? Well, there's no wireless. Oh dear, what a pity. Okay, if you've got entirely wireless networking, that might be a matter. This particular one is on the house Ethernet network, and in fact, because it was very convenient to connect it, it's actually connected to a wireless port, to a port on this wireless router here, which is connected to the wireless network in the house. I've got other computers around the house. I've got a room with servers and things in it and stuff like that. So to me, a wireless connection, I was never going to use it seriously for that. I would use a wired connection. You can use USB as well. It works just fine with that. But say Ethernet, this is, I believe, 100 meg Ethernet on this one. It works just fine. It's the setup is. I've got some setup details in the article that looks at setting up the printer, all the various details for that. I would say that when you've done your setup, do the calibration and adjustment prints. Print quality is really dependent on matching the printing and the paper, and all the little adjustments that get made when you do these calibrations just improve print quality, particularly at higher resolution settings. They make sure there's no banding, they make sure that bidirectional printing works well, doesn't get any quality impairment for that. Make sure you do them, they don't take much effort. In terms of ongoing maintenance, there are, like all inkjet printers, it needs to do cleaning. There is, with this printer, a printless nozzle check. You can do the traditional nozzle check, which does the bar patterns, which prints out on a strip of paper. In fact, if you've got roll paper in, it prints out and it trims it off and you get a strip about that, so it doesn't waste much paper. Or you can just load sheet of paper, or I've got plain paper loaded in the cassette here that I use occasionally for things. But if you want to do the test, the print test, the good old-fashioned print test is there. You can set auto cleanings, you can set not auto cleanings. You can have it so that if it fails a printless nozzle check, it'll do a cleaning automatically. You can limit that. You don't want it to going into a loop of doing cleanings, because with any inkjet printer, if a cleaning fails, leave it. Go away, have a cup of tea, cup of coffee, come back, do it again. Inkjet printers like to settle. Quite often when there are problems with stuff, and I've not had any problems with this in terms of actual clogging or anything like that. Do use it regularly though, and that is an important thing. But I'll come back to that later in terms of usage of the printer. But yeah, I've had no problems with this, but you do need to use it. I do a printed check. If I'm going to be doing profiling or something, I'll do the automatic when it starts up. I'll have it do a printless nozzle check. Then I'll do a printed nozzle check. What's the difference between the two? Well, an Epson service engineer told me this one. Turns out that the printless nozzle check uses the smallest droplet size. So it's firing the absolute smallest droplet size. The printed nozzle check uses the largest droplet size. So it's possible for one to fail and the other to be okay. I've seen it once, I think, in a few years of usage. Doesn't happen, but it's worth noticing that. But normally, use it enough and the nozzleless check is just fine. As I only really do the other one when I'm trying a new paper and I'm doing profiling and I want to make absolutely certain everything's working properly. In terms of cleaning, spare ink that's used in cleaning and maintenance, and as I say, this is a feature of any printer, goes into a tank which is down the bottom underneath the ink carts. On this side there's an maintenance ink tank that pulls out. That fills up. Doesn't take that long to change or do anything like that. I've had to change a couple over the time. They do fill up eventually. There is another, and it's I won't get it out, I won't call it hidden, but there's another maintenance cart in this printer which catches overspray from borderless printing. Now, borderless printing is a great way of messing up printers. This has its own maintenance tank just for catching overspray over the edge of paper. And when this printer was released, I was talking to people at Epson when they first announced it, and quite a bit of the design of this that's changed since the previous 4900 is involved in limiting the amount of dust build up inside the printer, and there's quite a hefty fan draws air through it, and also to stop ink build up. So the aim of the printer was to actually produce less muck inside. Now, these printers are meant for everyday use. If you're getting them for photography use, most photographers tend to have a lighter usage. What I would say is keep it clean. Keep it dust free. If you're going away a length of time, or even if you're in a slightly dusty environment, put a sheet over it or something like that. Keep dust out. Dust in printers does not cause, it doesn't go well. That goes for smaller printers as well. But a printer like this, it's look after it. One thing, if you're buying a printer like this, repairs out of warranty can be expensive. Parts can be expensive. Factor that into it and consider seriously getting the extended warranty. There are very few products, certainly domestic white goods and things, where I would say, oh yes, buy the extended warranty. It's basically, it's normally a way of sellers to print money, selling extended warranties with many products. But something like this, it is worthwhile considering. Have a look at the costs for it. Think about what you're going to be using the printer for, because a printer like this, as I said, needs a lot of use. And hopefully you're using it, either you can afford to just run it on a whim, or you're using it as part of a business. If you're using it as part of a print business, then look carefully at the costs and the ongoing costs. Ink costs per print will be lower because of the big ink carts and things like that, but look at the running costs of it. Certainly, I've compared some of this in the P900 versus P5000 video. Think about what you're doing as to whether it suits what you really need. Now, in terms of maintenance carts, as I've had a few to change, you will occasionally, after the printer's been running for a while, you will get something saying it tells it needs a strong clean, or a deep clean, a power clean. This comes up on the display here. You can safely ignore it for quite a while. If you do run it, it will use a well, not considerable amount, a fair amount of ink. I think somebody worked out that it cost about $30 worth of ink to do it. Think of it as an annual oil change or something like that. I do it occasionally. At the moment, this one's been nagging me to do it for a while. I haven't done it, and it's printing just fine. I might get round to it sometime when I next change the inks or something like that, but it will nag at you on the screen here, but you can safely ignore it. I've covered this in the written review as well, so you can find some more details on that. With the inks for this, you still have a matte black and a photo black. Well, lots of printers have that. On the P900, both are active at the same time and they automatically switch. On this, like many older Epson printers, you still need to manually tell the printer, well, you can do it from the computer, but I prefer the computer not changing black inks on a whim. If I've set something wrong, you can change it from the display here, from the controls. You can change it over, and you can change from matte black to photo black. Takes uses a few mil of ink, takes a few minutes. Do a nozzle check afterwards just to be sure everything's okay. I find it irksome. Now, people I know at Epson have told me for years that there are perfectly good reasons why they have the black ink swap. I've just found it because I do a mix of printing. I print on matte papers, I print on photo papers, which means that need to change perhaps changes my printing. So if I've got a roll, as I have here at the moment, got a roll of matte paper loaded, it's just enough if I want to do a glossy print to think, well, if I'm going to be doing some more matte prints, I've got to change to photo black, do that, put the paper in, do a print, change back to matte black. It's a hassle. And it's more than the ink usage, it's the hassle that is down. Some people don't mind this. Some people find it intensely irritating. To me, it is irksome. I'll leave it at that. But it's something that you do need to consider. But the newer printers, say the P7500 I looked at, and the P900, P700, do the black swap automatically, so it's not so much such a problem there. They have both, well, they don't do a black swap because they have both blacks running at the same time, so it's not even a black swap, if I make sure I get that right now. Anyway, media. You have, and I'll show some in a bit, I'll show some loading and various other things. Here's the roll holder, 2-inch, 3-inch rolls. It has tensioning adjustments. There are all kinds of adjustments to get that you can do if you want, setting up custom media, which I'll come back to again. You can do all kinds of adjustments for media. It's dead easy to load. You press a button, you put the leading edge in, you wait for a display to say press another button, and away you go, it's loaded. Similarly for sheet loading, it goes in here, there's an adjustment, width adjustment, sheet goes over at that side, goes up to USC A2, so it's 17-inch width, so you can put sheets here. This does not take multiple sheets very well, and in fact there's a specific warning on here that says don't use multiple sheets. You will not be stacking stuff up here. If you print greetings cards and the like, get a smaller printer. This printer does not handle small cards and small paper size and greeting card sizes particularly well. It really is not designed for that sort of thing. You can't load them up. You can't stack them up in here unless they're very thin, at which point they're probably too thin for you to use. So this is a roll paper sheet printer. It's not considered. It comes as no surprise. There's no CD attachment for printing CDs and things that you get on sort of consumer type printers. Dead easy to set up. With this one here, you load a sheet in. There's a little diagram on the top here. You load a sheet in. You look in. You can see inside here where the head goes. You can see the paper comes in. You push it down there, and you load your sheet. And that takes care of that. It's very simple, it's very reliable. It has a vacuum system, so it will hold the paper flat. it still doesn't like curled paper. No printer likes curled paper, but it will hold stuff flat and it prints very well. Depending on how paper comes out, you can set different aspects here. There is a drawer that comes out. Now, this particular one has always been a bit stiff, and the plastic jams. Somebody told me in a comment on the other video when I was looking at it that if you get some plastic cleaner, you can actually polish this and make this that comes in and out smoothly. It's just something I've never quite got round to doing. But you have a drawer that comes out here. Now, I mentioned that borderless. See there we go, that's back in. I mentioned the borderless overspray catcher maintenance cart at the bottom here. Borderless only comes in certain sizes, certain widths. You can't set arbitrary paper sizes and print borderless. Have a look at the written review. It's got the tables of what sizes it works with and everything like that. But borderless can be quite useful on roll paper, since there are a number of different options for cutting. Now, I tested this out on some other printers as well, but depending on how many cuts you get and the expansion, you can get quite nice borderless prints out of this. And I'm sure I've got, there we go, there's a borderless print that's produced on this printer. And it's been trimmed. There you go. You do have to go through the settings a bit. Read the manual. I know a lot of people don't like reading manuals, but when you get stuck for settings and things like this, read the manual, because almost certainly the information you want, and certainly all the stuff about borderless printing and trimming, is there in it. You may need to read it through 2 or 3 times to understand it, but it is all there, and that will so you can do borderless on this. The cassette, I mentioned this comes out, this will, and at the moment this has sheets of A3 plain paper in it. I was printing out some maps on plain paper, and in fact this is a sheet where I did a nozzle check, and there's the nozzle check, all the colours there, and it goes right through cyan. We've got an orange and green ink in this as well, which is a nice, gives a nice good colour range. But I can just pop this sheet back in here and it will go through again. I can adjust this, I can put A2 paper in here. There is a limit to thickness and other things. Once again, read the manual, look at the specs, you'll find all the details for that. But there are adjustable trays here. This extends out for even larger sheets. You can set it up and you can just load it up and leave it. When I was printing, proofing my book about tilt shift lenses, this is what I actually used to print the proof, to actually proofread the book on. Just loaded up A4 copier paper and printed a copy of the book to proof it for the proper checking for it. This is not an office printer, it doesn't have office printer functions at all, but it prints perfectly well and quite quickly in draft mode on plain paper, so it's quite useful for that. As mentioned, there's a cutter, there's a replaceable blade. I have used it occasionally for cutting bits of canvas. It is not rated for heavy cutting like that. If you started using it for cutting canvas regularly, it would probably wear the blade out. You'd need it. It's a replaceable blade. As a simple unit, you take this off and you change the blade easily enough to do. But that's that. Now, let's switch it on and I'll show some of the other functions. Right, printer's started up. Takes a minute or so. It does the paperless nozzle check. I've got it to do that as a default. It just does that and it starts up. And it is indeed nagging me to perform powerful cleaning all nozzles from administrator menu. You have to go through this menu to run this cleaning. Sorry printer, I'm not doing it today. I don't see the need for it yet. I will get round to doing it at some point. Just don't be overly put out by the nagging of it. It's just one of those things you have to do. Much like certain bits of car maintenance. Yes, you can get away with not doing them for a while, but you really should do them after a bit. But anyway, paper loading. I'll just pop this roll here. Now, this is the Innova IFA 178 I was testing recently. I've left it in here. It's unloaded, so it's not left when you switch the printer, it's not left sort of loaded into the mechanism, so it doesn't take any creases or anything like that. All I want to do here is I'm just going to press the, you can hear some clunks here, there's a button here, you can see it's rewind that, and we get a little light comes on the top here. Now this orange light, I like that. It reminds me of the warning light on the original Enterprise on the console at the helm, but anyway, I'm sure it's less important. But insert paper until message on LCD panel changes, and all I have to do, so I can freely spin this, get the leading edge, run the leading edge of the paper in, and the display changes and it says press the button there. I press that. Roll paper settings, are these okay? It remembers the previous paper that I've used, archival matte, which is the setting I've got for this one, so I'm going yes, and here we are. It's not a quiet printer. This is the printer that if you have a quiet office, shared office, you might want to put it in a corner out of the way a bit because it might be a bit too noisy for some people. Paper just came out here, it runs it through. That whoosh noise you get from it is the vacuum system. As I say, the vacuum system holds the paper in place. There we go, head is flying backwards and forwards, is checking the edge, checking that the paper's loaded okay. And it'll be ready for it, ready for use. Rolls paper backwards, forwards, sets attention. And it should, there we go. Fans quieten down a bit and that's it. Roll paper, loaded. Similarly with sheets, loading in through the slot here, that's also very simple, but I've just loaded paper. To unload the paper, all I just do is just press the button here again and it will unload the paper back onto that. Take the paper off, it's on a spindle, take the end off the spindle, just drop the paper in, pop the paper back in its box. With roll papers, if you're not familiar with using roll papers, unless you're going to be using them again in fairly short order, do not leave papers in the printer. Paper is best stored in the box as it came in with the inserts and everything and stored like that on its end, it's fine. And that will keep your paper nice and tidy. Anyway, I've got this. I'm not going to print on this. I've got lots of prints what I've done on this. And obviously to make these prints, you do get profiles. You get a lot of paper profiles installed for all different types of Epson media, far more than you get with smaller printers. And this is a heavy rag paper. It's a smooth finish rag paper. And the colour on this is excellent. I can't remember exactly. I haven't got a note on the back of this one, so this is one where it's just doomed for me to forget exactly what it was. But the richness of colour, everything is exactly as I want from the print, for a colour print. It works very well. In fact, this particular matte paper gives darker colours and darker blacks than I get with this one I tested, the IFA 178. That works really well for light pastel images, light colours. Stuck with this where I've got rich colours in the rocks and the sea and the sky and all the bits. Now this is at Land's End, or somewhere near Land's End in Cornwall, and that's the sort of pictures. If you want to make prints on this, this is an ideal printer for it. That's off roll, it's cut to length, hence the shape for it. That's also off roll paper, that's on a glossy paper. Once again, profiled really well. And there's one on board. Now that prints well. For the profiling, most of the papers, I profiled them with around about 3,000 patch targets. The reason for that, apart from more patches up to a point makes for better profiles, is that A3 plus sheets of paper take about just under 3,000 patches, and I can read one sheet in one go using an ISIS scanning spectrophotometer. Makes it really easy to make the profiles. But anyway, have a look at the written review, and you can see the full range of papers I covered and what I profiled and stuff. The prints look excellent. Blacks are rich. There's no problems with this. This for colour. For black and white, I would suggest using the ABW mode. Now in the written review I've got some details about how I adjusted the ABW mode, linearized it for some papers to get an even better looking output. But in terms of print quality, I have nothing to complain about. This printer produces similar results to the Epson P5000. It produces similar results to the newer P7500 and not dissimilar to the P900, P700. I find this one for black and white better than the P900, because if you try and use the P900 on a luster finish paper like this for black and white, you will get some bronzing if you want to use the highest print quality settings. Now on this, those print quality settings are higher in terms of dots per inch than you get with this printer. It's slower as well, but it's a higher quality in that respect. But what use are those settings if you can't actually use them for a print? I find the P900 on some glossy papers, the inks of it have just a little bit too much bronzing, for black and white in particular. Now I've covered this in the review of the P900, P700. It's not a big problem, but it's something where I would say this one is better. Now there's quite a bit older printer, so this one just has a relatively basic screen here. This is not a touch screen. There are buttons and a menu to control it. What you see here, from a usability point of view, the P900 shows itself as a much newer printer in what you can do with it. But all the functions you need are here in the menus. There are the ink levels, there are all the different inks, the maintenance tank levels and stuff. Everything you need for it. It works really well for it. Quibbles, what do I have about this? Well, I mentioned the black ink change. That's something you just learn to live with. If you want this, then if you want to use a printer like this, then you will have certain aspects of it which may or may not be an issue for you. I would definitely, for most printing, prefer this to the 900. The 900, however, I can lift and move. I can pick the 900 up and just move it somewhere else in the house. If I want to move this, I need somebody's help to move it. And if I want to move it downstairs, I need someone who's quite strong as well, because this really is heavy. I cannot lift this more than a little bit on my own. And unless you are particularly strong, don't even try it. It is huge. But it's just a nice printer. People ask, how much ink does it use? How much does it cost to print? Okay. You can get it to print, and I would do this with plain paper loaded rather than a nice photo paper. You can get it to print the ink usage for the last 10 print jobs. So you can print that out, and it will print out, and certainly on this plain paper I've got in here, it will give me a listing of how many mil of ink from each ink channel were used in the last 10 print jobs. You think, okay, is there any more to it than that? Well, yes, there's actually something called the LFP accounting tool, some special software which will allow you to do accounting on how much ink is used and all various aspects, costs and everything on using this printer. Unfortunately, it's Windows PC software. We do not have a Windows PC in the house. I haven't used one this century, which means from my point of view, there is no software that does it. Obviously, and this isn't just Epson, Canon do this as well. There seems to be this assumption that if you use Macs, you're not worried about the cost of inks and stuff like that. You're not running it for a business or anything. Well, actually, you're wrong, both of you. It would be nice to have that software. I did have some of the software on some of the Canon large format stuff I've seen here, but it would be nice if stuff like this was actually looked into a bit better. In terms of printing, I printed generally from Photoshop or I used Epson Print Layout. Now, Epson Print Layout software, I tried it when this first came out. It's just got better. I would say that if you're starting out printing, certainly on a P700, 900, have a look at the Epson Print Layout software. All the functionality is there that you would want for it. And if you're looking at borderless printing, though, do read that manual just to make sure you've got the cutting right and the expansion. I found some options weren't entirely covered by, well, I should say they might have been covered by it, but I couldn't find out how to get them to work, so I ended up printing from Photoshop, which is what I would do normally anyway. I mentioned the Epson Print Layout software because it's free, it's good, it's Windows and it's Mac. And also, don't ask me about printing on Lightroom. I've never liked Lightroom, especially for printing, a whole host of reasons, but yeah, that's another day. So there you have it, a nice 17-inch hefty printer if you are serious about making bigger prints. If you want wider than this, the P5000 is, which I've got a written review of. I haven't got a video of that, but I've got a written review of the P5000, and in many ways the P5000 is like the 24-inch version of this. Doesn't have the paper cassette though, but in terms of its functionality and its print quality, it's virtually the same as this. Now, I know somebody's going to ask me, this printer, my original review of it was several years ago, surely it's due for replacement. These printers last for ages in the product lines. These are not like mobile phones where they get refreshed every year. Sure, I think they might get round to updating it at some point, but I don't see that happening anytime soon. But so if you've got specific questions about this printer, have a look at the written review, but ask in the questions for the video. Drop me an email if you've got any specific queries about using it. I've got lots more stuff I'm going to cover on this. I've got some aspects of actually image preparation for printing and some other papers to look at again with this printer. Those require me to switch over to photo black ink, so we'll do that when I've finished all the testing on the matte paper I've got here. Hope that's of interest and you've stuck through the video. Sorry, they tend to be rather long because there's a lot that these printers do. Thanks for watching, and please do subscribe to the channel, and say, as I said before, ask the questions. Thanks.